The morning Amara got fired, she had just saved a man's life. Not in the way people say it, loosely. You saved me, after someone holds a door open or spots them a few dollars. No. She had pressed her hands against his chest and kept him breathing until help arrived. She had looked into his eyes, so he wouldn't close them. She had stayed. And then, not 2 hours later, she was sitting in front of Mr. Ocy's desk, listening to him explain why that was a problem. "You're a housekeeper, Amara." He said it like she'd forgotten, like maybe she'd confused herself with someone else that morning. "You clean rooms. You don't touch guests." He was unconscious on the floor. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Later, his lips were turning blue. "That is not your concern." Mr. Ocy folded his hands on the desk. He had the kind of face that practiced being calm. "We have trained medical staff on call. Your job was to radio it in and wait outside the door. I did radio it in." Amara looked at him. "They said 8 minutes. I looked at him and I didn't think he had 8 minutes. Mr. Ocy opened a folder. Inside was her employment file. She could see the corner of her original application, the one she'd filled out 3 years ago, with a pen that kept skipping. There's also the matter of guest privacy. Room 412 is registered to a long-term client. Very private individual. You entered without the secondary knock protocol. The door was open. He'd left it open, Amara. He closed the folder. "I'm going to need your badge and your cart key." She sat there for a moment. She thought about the man on the floor of room 412, the way his chest had barely been moving, the way he'd looked almost peaceful, which was the scariest part. The way dying sometimes looks like rest. She thought about her mother, Mama Yetunde, back in the apartment on the 3rd floor of a building with a broken elevator, waiting on Amara's Thursday envelope to cover the electricity. She thought about her daughter, 6 years old, who had named her stuffed rabbit Mr. Ears and believed, with her whole heart, that her mother could fix anything. Then Amara reached up, unclipped her badge, and set it on Mr. Ocy's desk. She didn't cry until she was outside. She sat on the low wall near the hotel's service entrance, the one the kitchen staff used for smoke breaks, and she put her face in her hands and she let herself have 5 minutes. Just 5. Then she wiped her face with the sleeve of her uniform that she would have to return, she realized, which meant she'd need to go back inside. And she straightened her back, and she looked at the parking lot, and she thought, okay, what now? What now turned out to be very hard to answer. She'd gotten the job at the Meridian Grand 3 years ago through a cousin's connection, and she'd been grateful every single day because it paid more than the laundromat and had benefits. Real benefits. The kind with a card you could show at a clinic. She'd built her whole life's arithmetic around that job. Rent on the 1st. Mama Yetunde's medication on the 15th. A small amount set aside each month in an envelope she kept in the back of a kitchen drawer because she didn't fully trust banks with money she couldn't afford to lose. Now the arithmetic didn't work anymore. She applied everywhere. The other hotel on the main strip, no openings. The airport cleaning service, a 3-month wait list. A restaurant on Decatur that needed someone for the early shift. She went in, filled out the paperwork, smiled at the manager, went home and waited. Nothing. She picked up 2 weeks of cash work helping a woman named Mrs. Abiodun sort through her late husband's belongings. It was quiet, careful work, and Mrs. Abiodun cried sometimes, and Amara didn't try to fill those silences. She just folded sweaters and stacked books and let the woman grieve in the same room as someone who was also, in a smaller way, grieving something. When that ended, there was a week of nothing. Mama Yetunde said they would be fine, in the way mothers say things will be fine, with total certainty and no specific plan. She made jollof rice from what was left in the pantry and served it like it was a celebration. Amara's daughter, Simi, ate 2 bowls and asked if they could have it every night. Amara said maybe, and smiled, and after Simi was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table and did the math again, like doing it one more time might change the numbers. It didn't. She started taking the bus to a part of the city she didn't usually go to, a business district where the buildings had revolving doors and the coffee shops charged $7 for something small. She went into every hotel lobby she could find and asked to speak with someone in housekeeping management. Some of them took her application. Most of them smiled in a way that meant no before they'd even looked at her. One afternoon, coming out of a building where the receptionist had handed her application back. Actually handed it back, like returning something unwanted. She stepped onto the sidewalk and walked straight into a man who was moving fast in the opposite direction. He was tall, somewhere in his 60s, in a charcoal suit that cost more than Amara's monthly rent. He dropped the phone he was holding, and when it hit the pavement, she saw a spiderweb of cracks spread across the screen. She picked it up immediately. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I wasn't looking." He stared at the cracked screen and then at her, and for a second she thought he was going to be the kind of person who made this into a thing. She'd met that kind of person before, but he just exhaled. "It's fine. I wasn't looking either. I really am sorry." She held the phone out and he took it. "Is there anything?" I said, "It's fine." But he said it without heat. He looked tired, actually. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night, but from a long stretch of them. "Are you all right? I nearly knocked you over." "I'm okay." She looked at him more carefully. His face had the gray undertone of someone who hadn't been sleeping, and he was holding his left arm in a way that was just slightly wrong. Just slightly too close to his body, like protecting something that hurt. "Are you okay?" "Your arm." He waved it off. "I appreciate the concern." He turned to go, and Amara almost let him. She almost said nothing else, but there was something in the way he was moving, a little too careful, a little too deliberate, and she had by now spent enough time around people who weren't fine to recognize one. "Is there someone with you?" she asked. "Someone who can drive you." He stopped, turned back, looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. "Why do you ask? You're holding your arm like it's bothering you more than you're saying. And you look." She stopped herself. "I'm sorry, it's not my business." "No." He studied her. "What were you going to say? You look like you need to sit down." He was quiet for a moment. A cab moved past. Someone's phone rang 3 times and stopped. Then he said, quietly, "My driver is around the corner. I was supposed to have a meeting in that building." He nodded at the revolving doors behind her. "I don't think I'm going to make it." "Let me walk with you to the car," Amara said. She didn't think about it. That was the thing she'd remember later. She didn't pause and decide, didn't calculate anything. She just said it because it was the obvious next thing. He didn't argue. They walked slowly around the corner, and there was a black car idling by the curb, and a young driver who startled when he saw them coming and jumped out quickly. "Mr. Adebayo, sir." "I'm all right, Kofi." He didn't sound all right. He let Kofi open the door, and then he turned to Amara. "Thank you." "I don't." "Thank you." "Of course," she said. She watched the car pull away, and then stood on the sidewalk for a moment before continuing down the block. She did not think about it much after that. She had too many other things to think about. The electricity bill, Simi's school shoes, which had a hole in the sole that Amara had been covering with a cut piece of cardboard from a cereal box. The fact that the back drawer envelope was getting very thin. She found a part-time position at a dry cleaner on the east side, Tuesday through Saturday, and it didn't pay what the hotel had paid, but it was something. The owner, Mr. Park, was a quiet man who asked almost nothing of her, except that she show up on time and handle the garments carefully. She did both. She took the bus there and back, and on Sundays she cooked with Mama Yatunde and listened to Simi narrate elaborate stories she'd invented about Mr. Ears and his rabbit family. 2 months passed like this. Not bad, exactly. Just narrow. The kind of life where you move very precisely because there isn't room for mistakes. And then, one afternoon, a car stopped in front of the dry cleaner. It was the kind of car that made people on the sidewalk glance over without meaning to. Black, quiet, expensive in a way that doesn't need to announce itself. Kofi got out of the driver's seat and came around and opened the back door, and Mr. Adebayo stepped out. Amara was behind the counter when he came in. She almost didn't recognize him. He looked different. The grayness was gone. He stood straighter. He was still in a suit, but this one was navy, and he had the unhurried look of someone who'd gotten some rest. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. Something moved across his face. "You work here," he said. "Yes." She recovered herself. "Do you need something cleaned?" He looked around the small shop, the plastic-wrapped garments on their circular rack, the ticket spools on the counter, the little bell on the door that had rung when he came in, and then back at her. "I don't, actually." He paused. I've been looking for you. Amara set down the ticket she was holding. Pardon? After that day, he walked slowly toward the counter. The street. The doctors later said it was a cardiac event, not the first one. He said it simply like stating weather. Kofi got me to the hospital in time, partly because you told me to go. He looked at her directly. I wanted to find you, I asked Kofi. He remembered which building you came out of. The people there said you'd come in looking for work. He stopped. I should have led with that. You were looking for work. I was, Amara said carefully. Are you still? She looked at him for a long moment. The bell above the door jingled as someone walked past on the street outside but didn't come in. What are you asking me, sir? I have a foundation, Mr. Adebayo said. We fund vocational programs, school construction, small business development across West Africa and here in the States. We are, currently, without an operations coordinator. The person who had the role before left last month to have a baby. He smiled briefly, which is very good for her and very difficult for us. He set a card on the counter. I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a job interview. If you're not interested or if it doesn't work out, that's the end of it. But I would like to try. Amara looked at the card. It was heavier than normal cards, the kind with a texture you could feel. Debutation, his name, and a number. How did you find me specifically, she asked. This shop is not. It's not obvious. It took a while, he admitted. Kofi has a long memory for faces. We must have checked a dozen places. He paused. You didn't think I was going to just let it go. She didn't say anything. You stayed on that sidewalk until my car actually drove away, he said. Most people don't do that. Most people walk off while you're still getting in the door. He looked at her steadily. I noticed. Amara picked up the card. She thought about the morning she'd sat on the wall, outside the hotel's service entrance, and given herself 5 minutes. She thought about the arithmetic that never came out right, the cereal box cardboard in Simi's shoe, the back drawer envelope that had gotten so thin she'd started being afraid to look at it. She thought about Mama Yetunde making jollof rice like it was a celebration, because that was what her mother knew how to do, make something out of what was there. I'd like to hear more about the position, Amara said. Mr. Adebayo nodded. I thought you might. The interview happened 4 days later, in an office building downtown that had actual plants in the lobby. Not plastic ones, real ones, a whole wall of them. She wore the blazer she'd bought 2 years ago for a cousin's graduation and hadn't worn since, and she sat across from a woman named Miss Tunde, who ran operations for the foundation and asked questions that were harder than Amara expected. Not trick questions. Real ones. What would you do if 2 program timelines conflicted, and both teams thought they were the priority? How do you communicate bad news to people who are deeply invested in an outcome? Tell me about a time you had to make a decision without enough information. Amara answered honestly. She said what she knew and said clearly what she didn't. She did not pretend. Afterward, Miss Tunde walked her to the elevator and said, We'll be in touch this week. And Amara thanked her and pressed the lobby button and stood in the elevator for the 30-second ride down and thought, I don't know. I genuinely do not know. They called 3 days later. She was at the dry cleaner, steaming a wedding dress, when her phone buzzed. She stepped into the back and looked at the screen and saw the foundation's number, and her hand was very still for a moment before she answered. The role was full-time, benefits, a salary that made Amara have to sit down on a rolling stool someone had left by the garment press. She thanked Miss Tunde and said she would confirm by end of day, and then she sat there for a while, holding the phone in her lap, listening to the hiss of the steam and the little bell on the door up front. She called Mama Yetunde. Mama Yetunde cried, the kind of crying that is also laughing, that is also relief so deep it has to come out as something. Amara could hear Simi in the background asking what happened, and Mama Yetunde saying, your mama, Simi, your mama. On her last day at the dry cleaner, Mr. Park shook her hand and said she'd been one of the most careful people he'd had. She thanked him and meant it. She took the bus home for the last time and walked up to the apartment, and Simi ran at her from the kitchen doorway because she always ran at her, every evening, like Amara had been gone for years. Guess what? Amara said, catching her. What? Things are going to be a little different now. Simi pulled back and looked at her with very serious eyes. Good different or bad different? Amara kissed her forehead. Very good different. Her first week at the organization was overwhelming in the best way. Spreadsheets and program reports and meetings where people talked about things that mattered, and she had to take a lot of notes and ask more questions than she was used to asking, and she stayed late twice without anyone asking her to, because she wanted to understand it properly. Miss Tunde told her at the end of the week that she was doing well. She said it like she meant it. Mr. Adebayo stopped by the office on Thursday of that week. He did not come to Amara's desk specifically, but when he walked past the open doorway and saw her, he paused. "How's the first week?" he asked. "Hard," she said. "Really good." He smiled. That's the right answer. He started to move on, then stopped. "The man in room 412, he said without much preamble. "You heard about that?" She looked up. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't thought it was her story to tell. "That was me," Mr. Adebayo said. 3 years ago. Different hotel. Different city." He paused. "I looked into what happened to the woman who helped me. By the time I found out, she'd already been let go." His expression was even, but there was something underneath it. "I made a donation to the hospital, which was useless. I should have found her. I didn't. I've regretted it since." Amara was very still. "I don't know if you believe in second chances," he said, "or in things happening for reasons. I'm not sure I do entirely." He looked at her steadily. "But I know what it looks like when someone stays, when someone doesn't calculate whether it's worth it, when someone just does the right thing." He nodded once, more to himself than to her. "I know what that looks like, and I don't walk away from it anymore." He continued down the hall. Amara looked at her desk for a long moment. The spreadsheet was still open on her screen. Outside the window, the city was doing what the city does. Moving, noise, light changing. She picked up her pen and she got back to work.